Evening, everybody, and welcome to the sixth episode of the Soccer Scene with myself, Adrian Finnan, and our co-host, Noel O'Connor. I've promoted you there, Noel, after a couple of years of service. I suppose it's about time, really, isn't it?
It's time for promotion. You normally get one every year, but there you go.
I suppose, look, Noel, we have plenty to get through, obviously, as always, in terms of the League of Ireland First Division and Treaty United in particular being our focus. And obviously it'll be the focus of everyone in the League of Ireland this week because the Premier Division is on a break week. And Ireland action obviously as well, so it's very busy on the soccer front. It's fair to say. We'll start, Noel, with the last week's action for Treaty United. Treaty United drew 2-2 with Athlone Town. It only begins to tell the story, Noel, doesn't it? Really, you have Treaty United going 2-0 ahead. Athlone being reduced to 10 men. Then Treaty have what looked like a stonewall penalty ruled out or turned down, should I say, by Alan Patchell, and Athlone scored 2 goals, and one of them being literally with the last kick of the game. So, considering the circumstances, it was probably devastating for Treaty, really, and you could tell by the body language of the players it really shattered them.
Yeah, look, it really was a really tough night at the very end, and I'm sure that it's taken a few days to get over that one as well. We spoke about it last week. We were saying how important it was to keep a clean sheet, and in fairness to Treaty, I thought it was a more typical Treaty performance in the first half, where thought Athlone were bright, and they've done what a lot of teams have done to Treaty this year: attack the wide areas and get at the full backs, and got a bit of joy, got some good crosses in the box, but didn't convert those chances into scores. And I'm sure Treaty, with the few weeks that they've had, were very happy to get in 0-0 at halftime.
Yeah, absolutely. I've already mentioned it, Noel, and there was 2 big, I suppose, craws in the nest of Treaty United after the game. One was the Stephen Christopher penalty incident, which I felt myself was a penalty, which would have been a game changer, you'd imagine, because 3-0 is a mountain for 10 men, never whatever about 2-0. And then, of course, the big contentious issue was the added time. Now, look, we'll have 2 sides of the story. Some will say you shouldn't be, even if you'd added on another 10 minutes, we shouldn't have been conceded against 10 men in injury time. That's one side of the argument. And I suppose the other side of the argument is a lot of people didn't understand where Alan Patchell got the extra couple of minutes from.
Yeah, look, it all really happened in the second half. Treaty came out of the blocks really well. Looked like a different team in the second half. They seem to have a lot more confidence about themselves. Particularly Success Erdogan, just getting on the ball a bit more and taking on the full back, created the first chance for Enda Curran, which obviously was a contentious one for Athlone, but I think overall it was probably right, where the ball took a ricochet off the defender and broke him, and he finished it really well. A nice shot. He kept it really hard and low, and as we said all the time, just what a lethal player he is in the penalty box, and that's where you try to have him as much as you can. And they kept on going, looked dangerous from set plays as well, and the second goal came from a corner and overhit one to the back post. I wasn't quite sure who headed it back. Was it Lee Devitt or was it Anto O'Donnell? But you just see the movement of Enda Curran, where he just drops back into a little pocket of space, takes the shot on early and finishes to the net. And at that stage, you'll be saying things are looking really good now. 2-0 up. This was even before the red card. You felt that it was going to be their night.
Absolutely. And I suppose, Noel, we don't talk about referees too often. We maybe mention a few decisions, but I suppose it's just noticeable because I do remember Alan Patchell, the first time he ever came to my attention was when Treaty United supporters and I suppose players as well at the time were outraged about the sending off for Stephen Christopher against UCD back in 2021 when in the playoff semi-final, second leg in the bowl. And then, of course, obviously, it's built now after the match in Athlone as well. And I was just wondering, because I know Tommy Barrett referenced it afterwards that, Stephen Christopher was the player at the centre of it again. He was at the centre of the penalty incident as well after being also at the incident in the bowl. And I was just wondering, was there ever a time when you were managing Limerick or when you were involved with Cork and even Wexford, was there ever, I suppose, a referee where you looked at it the week of a game and said, I really hope that we didn't have that referee? And does that fester inside a camp a little?
Look, there probably was cases of it. I think I was more bothered about the 4 officials, in fairness, than the referees. There was 1 or 2 of them who seemed to really like sending me off. But I think it's something that you shouldn't get bogged down in. Like, I do agree with anyone who wants to say it. I think this guy is a very poor referee. He makes a lot of poor decisions. I'm not sure, was he involved in that Shelburne game when did Mark Walsh take a late elbow from Michael O'Connor?
I think he was. I'm open to correction
I
on
think he
that.
was as well, and I think that's where it did start, and then he gave Michael O'Connor a yellow card. I think Mark Walsh missed 6 or 8 weeks after that game, But I was looking at some of the decisions even before the penalty. I thought the build up to the corner that Treaty scored, I thought Success had barged over the defender on the edge of the box, and I was expecting a free to Athlone, and then he gave a free to Treaty. And I'm not sure if this happened in injury time or just before it, but there was a head injury to an Athlone player. It wasn't a malicious one. I think that Ben O'Riordan might have caught someone with his arm on the head, and he gave the free out to Treaty. I think anyone would say this. I can't remember the first yellow card for the Athlone player that was sent off, but the second one, to me, he looked unsighted. His eye was on the ball. The Treaty player came in, from an angle at the last second, and he caught him, and I thought it was a really harsh second yellow, particularly for a red. And I think
it's fair to say, Noel, as well, that you're right there in terms of it did seem to be that Athlone supporters seem to be irate a lot of the time as well with the officiating on the night.
Yeah, you've got a bad referee when both teams are really irate with his performance. And I think I used to think that, there was some kind of vendetta going on, or that the referee possibly could be a cheat. And then I just realized that he wasn't a cheat at all. He was just useless. And I think, in fairness to this guy, he's right up there with some of the worst referees that we've seen in the league in the last 20 years. But I'd be loath to go down the path of talking about the referee too much. The bottom line is, despite what's happened in the last few weeks, and maybe they were a little bit short of confidence still, Treaty were 2-0 up in the driving seat away to Athlone, and Athlone were down to 10 men. And, it was within their own control to actually win the game, and they just failed to do the right things maybe in the last 15 or 20 minutes to make sure that happened.
And you think, Noel, as well, that is maybe so symptomatic of the way the season has went so far? Because Treaty, you're coming in, you're in I suppose a different position this season anyway, where you're winning 2-0. You're desperate to get off the mark with 3 points, and they have a couple of points, sorry, but now they have. But you want to get to 3 points. Maybe you start, I suppose, there's a bit of panic sets in. Have you ever seen that, I suppose, yourself as well, where, your teams are so desperate that maybe there's rush of bloods to the head, maybe more so than anything else?
I just felt that they didn't manage the game after they went 2-0 up. I remember just thinking to myself when I was watching it, I made out that it would have been 4 or 5 minutes of injury time in the match, and they took the ball into the corner or went to take a short corner, and I made out there's about 30 minutes to go. And in my head, and look, I've been in that situation where we might be winning by a goal or 2 goals, and I always just say, no, it's too early. It's too early to do that. There was a lot of football to be played. They were playing against a team that were down to 10 men, and they needed to keep playing on the front foot. Particularly a couple of corners they got where they might have put 1 or 2 in the box, particularly after scoring from one already and having an extra man on the pitch. I felt that it probably wasn't the right thing to do. In terms of the goals, I thought, some of the defending was really bad, even from the Athlone penalty area, where I think, they failed to block a clearance or get their, just put their body on the line and stop it and make sure that most of the play in that period of time is in the Athlone half, and that you don't let them out that easy. And I suppose the worrying thing about it for me, and I think we've touched on it, and there seems to be a bit of a pattern, a late goal against Bray. I know they didn't concede a late goal in Kerry, but it was a match that they played 10 men as well, and we felt that they should have got a goal or 2 themselves maybe in the last 20 minutes, and the nearest team to score was Kerry. Then you've, 3 late-ish goals playing Cobh, and now you've a couple of late goals against Athlone. So whether it's a psychological thing or a fitness thing, it's often difficult to know, but they're certainly not finishing games well. And there is a pattern there, and it's probably something that they really need to think about.
Absolutely, I'm sure it's at the forefront of the management mind. Noel, you mentioned obviously 2 goals, 2 well-taken goals by Enda Kern. That's 3 goals for him in the season. The problem we have, Noel, is we were worried at the start of the season whether Enda would be able to keep up his form. The problem is he has done that, but we're probably on the verge now of being way too over-reliant on him. He's the only player to score.
Yeah, and that certainly is a worry. Like, there's no doubt about it, and that's why it was a bit baffling to say that they didn't try to press home their advantage, because they had got a couple of corners, and we spoke about the likes of Anto O'Donnell, and how good he is in those situations, and he looks to me like a guy he's made a couple of mistakes, and maybe the confidence is a little bit low, and for him to score a goal in that game or any game at this stage would be a real boost to himself, and would probably help to improve his overall performance. But outside that, again, we're looking at success, and while he's done quite well, he's in a position where we expect him to get goals. I know that Dean George wasn't available, but they certainly need to look at other parts of the field for goals, the likes of Conor Barry, probably Stephen Christopher. It's probably a bit soon to talk about Alec Byrne, but hopefully he can contribute. And in fairness to Lee Devitt, when he's not playing left full, as I said, he's inclined to get a couple of chances to score, maybe not in every game, but certainly every couple of games, he pops up on the edge of the box, giving himself a decent chance to score.
Yeah, certainly. And last night, Noel, there was more disappointment, maybe on a lesser scale, but a Munster Senior Cup competition nonetheless, which you had a sweet victory against Cobh Ramblers in 2006 with Limerick FC, and I know that you've always mentioned it being the same as a Munster hurling title, so why would people look down their noses at it? Obviously both Treaty and Cobh, considering the busy schedule, never going to play full strength sides. Last night they were going to try and blood younger players as well, which made it a very open game as it turned out. Noel, some of the defending from both sides wasn't particularly good. Conor Drynan was quite good for Cobh. One bright spark, I suppose, for Treaty, a couple of bright sparks to be fair. They played a lot of their younger players. Josh Quinlivan, Scott Kirkland, Fionn Doherty, all played as well. Darren Nowanko, you'd be very familiar with, as you know, before from the Kennedy Cup a few years ago now. Also played and scored for Treaty, which was one of the positive notes. And Colin Kelly with a very well taken goal as well. And considering injuries that are probably mounting in that forward area and all as well, we'll likely see Colin Kelly get more of a chance in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, probably, and it'll be no harm. And it's something that we've certainly touched on here. Just overall in terms of what the Treaty project is, I mean, I think we should see a few more. I've name checked Darren Owanko myself a few times. I think he's a decent defender. I haven't seen him obviously play for a couple of years, but he was certainly a guy that you could coach. There was a bit of talk around the 2019 Kennedy Cup coaching staff this morning about the bit of work that we did in terms of organising from set plays, and in fairness to Darren, he was one of them that took it on board. I know he scored in the final, as in the secondary final against Cork for the Limerick District League, from a header from a wide free kick. So look, these things are important. He got his name in lights, and I think that we should see a bit more of him now in the next few weeks and see if he can step up to the next level.
Because as I mentioned, the injuries are mounting up, Noel, for Treaty, whether that's short term, medium term, or long term. I haven't even seen Denzel Fernandez. I'd actually forgotten about him until someone had said it to me at Chapman Park last night during the game, because he hasn't played at all, but he's still on the books with Treaty United. Mark Ludden is the pressing concern. Tommy Barrett did mention afterwards to Jason Shanahan, the Treaty United media officer, that Mark Ludden had a scan last week, which I believe is on his knee. So that's a testing weight, but that doesn't sound very promising for Mark Ludden, which would be lost obviously for Treaty. Then you have Dean George, who could be another couple of weeks out. Willie Armshaw struggling, and Success Erdogan was left out of the game against Cobh, although he is expected to be pushing hard to be available for Waterford. So the squad is going to be stretched, Noel. So some of those players are going to be getting minutes.
Yeah, look, it's probably overall a good thing. You'd probably look at it and say, well, the more senior guys have been on for the first 3 or 4 games and haven't really set the world on fire. So look, if these guys get a chance, I always said it, you might throw 3 or 4 in, and look, if one of them or two of them take to it like a duck to water, well then it's it's success. and I'm sure that one or two of them will kind of confound us, if you like, and play above themselves and become fixtures in the team, and that's something that you have to do, and it is going to be a long season, and if we're kind of wondering about the fitness of the team, then certainly you're probably more prone to injury as well. So that would kind of feed into the fact that we will see a few more of these guys in the next few weeks.
Left back could be a problem, not so much in, Lee David can do a job in there, Noel, there's no doubt. I don't think Tommy Barrett will be too keen to consistently leave Lee David there, especially if Mark Ludden is going to be long term. So he is probably going to be looking for other options. Now, Fionn Doherty had looked fairly sharp, I have to say, in the first half, particularly for Treaty last night. We know it's going to be a huge step up for anyone that comes into, particularly if it's a younger player, Noel. But you also mentioned that maybe Darren Wanko might have the athleticism to fill in at left back if called upon too.
Yeah, I think he would, and I think I was talking to someone, and I always felt that it wasn't a bad idea. I know he's a centre back, but he was a left-sided centre back. That we always would have maybe played a centre half, a younger centre half, as a full back for a while until he got a bit of experience. I name check Paul Finucane, who actually started his League of Ireland career with Tommy Lynch as left full before he moved in. And I know that I played Brian Buckley left full as well, when he first joined the club. So it wouldn't be, unheard of as such. He is a fine athlete. Now we know he's a threat from set play as well. And, it might give the team a bit more balance, because I think that this team certainly needs maybe someone like Lee Devitt in the middle of the pitch, to do a bit of running around as well. And I think they might be the ideal partner for Alec Burton, hopefully, when he steps up. I thought he was quite prominent as well on Friday night. In fairness to him, he played quite well, and so did Conor Barry.
Yeah, and I know a lot of those players were brought in the second half, Noel, as obviously Treaty tried to rescue the game, but Cobh have marched on to Munster Senior Cup semi-final. I know that another point after the game that Jason Shannon brought up to Tommy Barrett, actually, Noel, is one you've discussed as well on the podcast. It's always been a talking point for the last 20 or 30 years, at least in Limerick, when things haven't been going well, is the perceived, anyway, this season in particular, the perceived lack of local players maybe in the first team squad or the first 11 with Treaty United. I know we have a heavy Galway contingent for maybe the last 18 months. And Tommy Barrett did say, and I know I had discussions with him before in the past about this, he said that he had approached local players during the off season, and his point was, I can't drag them through the door of the ground as well. Now I do have to say, in agreement with him, Noel, and I felt this even at junior level, maybe not talking about the really young lads now, but at junior level, and I know that they have approached a few junior players to come and play for Treaty United, that maybe not just the ambition, that I feel the ambition of players has definitely dropped, but also obviously other factors in terms of work. I suppose, Noel, the one thing I will say is work commitments and family commitments have always been there in the past for guys as well, including in your time. Obviously it hasn't changed since then, so I know a lot of people have been using that, but there does seem to be a lack of ambition locally, Noel, as well as anything of, why would I bother go and play with Treaty United and go around the country when I can just sit and be a big fish in a small pond. And that was one thing that griped me a bit, is that I did agree with Tommy Barrett that I have seen that, and in discussions with people I have seen that. I don't know if what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, probably my thoughts of that are they're not the guys you want anyway. I mean, if that's their attitude, like it's not the only game. Say, we can't really say that there's anyone who prefer to play junior hurling than senior hurling, or junior rugby than senior rugby. Like, I'm not sure who he did approach. Obviously, you need to approach a guy certainly with ambition. Like, if you're talking about a guy who's probably playing in junior football for 4 or 5 years, it's probably a bit late. I mean, certainly the first time I was with Limerick, it wasn't money that brought him to us, and it was guys that had a bit of ambition and they wanted to get the chance. And I'm sure they're still around. Allied to the fact that now you have a kind of a steady stream, or you should have, with an under 19, under 17, under 15. That's something that wasn't around before. Yeah, absolutely. And they're the guys that, it is the third year now at Treaty. So even guys that, came in 3 years ago in under 15s are now 18, shoving on 19. So there's no reason why there's a few of them. And I'm not even talking about the 2 under 17s teams and the under 19 teams that have gone through as well. Because I do see it myself, there is plenty of good players around. I'm obviously involved with the Kennedy Cup, and whilst there's 8 or 9 or 10 players gone from last year's under 13 squad, I think we still have a decent enough team, our squad, to work with in the Kennedy Cup. So it's about finding the guys who actually want to commit and want to play. I do remember Ray O'Halloran saying to me my first time that I went to Limerick, and a lot of, say, the youth team and the under 21 team moved up into the senior squad that year. And he said something remarkable to me. He said, the great thing about, these players is they haven't been exposed to junior football. So there's probably a real point in maybe looking inwards and making sure that the right players are coming through the academy and not being afraid to throw them in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, I suppose, no matter how long we talk about it, no matter how many opinions, it's always going to be a talking point, isn't it? And in Limerick in particular, when things aren't going well, when things are going well, no one has anything to say. Even if you have 11 Dublin players on the team, we've noticed that in the past as well. That seems to be a big problem too, I suppose. But just to move on, Noel, as well, to this week's fixture for Treaty United, they have Waterford FC at home. They're well familiar with Waterford after last season and met them over 2 legs in the semi-final. Lost out despite a valiant display in the second leg in the RSC in that game. Waterford are also, hunting a win here, Noel. They've had a very patchy start to their league campaign. 2 wins in 5, 2 draws and a defeat. And obviously the defeat was to Galway as well. They're already 7 points behind Galway in the table, and even early doors, that'll put a bit of pressure on them considering the expectation level. I always felt, Noel, after losing, Phoenix Patterson, you'd say, okay, that's one player of a potent front three you've lost. It's not the end of the world. But then when they lost Junior Coturna maybe just about 5 days before the season, that was a real problem for them. And it seems to have been, because they seem to be over-reliant as well on Massimo Tria, who did start the season very well. But since then, obviously, the whole team has tailed off.
Yeah, and how's your prediction for the title winners looking at the moment?
I was hoping you would mention that, but look, it's early doors as well.
Yeah, they'll have to raid Barnet or wherever they have to raid anyway in the window to try and rescue it.
Fleetwood, they'll have to raid Fleetwood.
Yeah, what really surprised me about the whole situation is, and you're right about losing those players and the big loss, but when I looked at the first couple of team sheets, I noticed that the likes of Niall O'Keefe wasn't playing. I think Shane Griffin didn't start, and Sobowale as well. And it's one thing to be down 2 or 3 of last year's team, but they seem to me to be down about 7 of last year's team. So it's probably no surprise that they haven't started maybe as well as they finished last season, because it's a completely different side, and that brings its own pressure. And I suppose there's kind of echoes of last year now as well, reverberating around the place. With the poor start with Ian Morris, I'm sure. Yeah. Danny Sutherland's feeling a bit of pressure. I see he got sent off last week. I think they were 2-0 up and it was 2-2. I know Shane Griffin hit the post very late on, which would have maybe changed the whole mood there. But certainly they won't be in great form coming here. And I suppose it isn't really the worst game in the world for Treaty to have, because people will look at it and say, oh my God, they've no chance there. But, in fairness to Treaty, while they weren't great in the first half, last week they didn't concede, and then they got 2 goals. They came into the game and got 2 goals. It was a bit like the Treaty of old, if you like. And bar the last 10 or 12 minutes, if they can galvanise themselves and have a real go on Friday night, I think they have a chance of coming up with a shock result, because certainly no one will be expecting it now.
Really hoping for that, Noel, aren't we? Because it has happened maybe in the past, particularly last season. I think Treaty went on a bad run where they had a lot of draws, maybe a couple of defeats, and then there's a big performance there. That's what everyone will be hoping for. Now, look, we hope that there's a big enough crowd. Results suggest in Limerick that the crowd might drop to 600-ish, considering results in recent weeks. But hopefully that won't be the case, and the weather won't be as bad as it has been, which is always factors too to keep the crowd up. But you're just hoping, aren't you? Every week we're just hoping for that, that big performance that restores the faith in the team as such.
Yeah, look, and there's still a nucleus of a good team there, and some of them have are playing with a bit of form. Just need to get a few more over the line, if you like. And I suppose in terms of the crowd, I'm sure Waterford will bring a decent crowd as well. I mean, their support certainly in the last 18 months has been really good. They'll have fond memories of the Marcus Field, and they won't really have much of a work about going up there. It's a game that if things go Treaty's way, and look, I suppose at some stage you're saying, sooner or later that they're going to have to win a game anyway, and there's a different kind of pressure on Waterford that's on Treaty, and I still would give them a really good chance.
And I know that changes are limited, I suppose, in some ways, but in terms of the attack, Noel, would you stick with Byrne leading the line, Christopher playing off him, and maybe having success and Conor Barry either side?
Yeah, I think certainly 3 of the 4. I wouldn't say that I just didn't notice him a lot particularly in the first half, Stephen Christopher, and he was hardly mentioned on commentary. I know there seemed to be a bit of an error in the starting 11 in terms of the 11 that was put up on the Treaty Facebook page and the one that was on the screen. They seemed to say that it was Willie Armshaw was starting, but it was apparent that he wasn't there. But it wasn't easy to see Stephen Christopher. Thought Success did particularly well. Thought Conor Barry played well too, and obviously ended with his 2 goals. Look, it's probably defensive stuff that they need to galvanise, whether it's a lack of confidence or, they're just missing maybe the leadership of Mark Ludden or someone to talk back there. I think it's going to be very important. But if they can just get over that kind of mental block they have at the moment in terms of conceding goals and kind of soft goals, and again stay in the game and certainly try and keep it a clean sheet for as long as they can, it'd probably be more as well the same team. If we look at a change at left full, and even if he does bring in Darren Wanko, in general, when you bring a guy in for his first game, he's generally very, very good. It's often, the second or third game maybe that things don't work out as well as we hope. So I wouldn't be particularly worried about whoever goes in there on Friday night. Certainly we might have to revise that after a couple of weeks, but whoever goes in there, I'm sure will give a good account of themselves.
Suppose that without drawing too much attention to it, Noel, that's a talking point as well, isn't it? The centre back relationship or combination, Anthony O'Donnell and Andy Spain, because I know in the first game of the season, Reardon, I think Andy Spain was out with concussion. I'm not fully sure, but then Reardon partnered Anthony O'Donnell at centre back. Now, to be fair, they obviously, I don't think they created an awful lot tonight. I thought the 2 boys looked relatively comfortable, and they are familiar with each other from Cobh Ramblers, I think. Anyway, before. But then obviously Ben Reardon was changed back to right full, and I know you've had your reservations about putting him out there in the past. I was just wondering, do you see a situation where Ben Reardon could partner Anthony O'Donnell and that might improve things? Without being maybe too harsh on Andy Spain, I don't know, you're just searching, aren't you, for answers? I'm sure Tommy Barrett and his management team are searching for answers for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I would have mentioned it last week as well in terms of, he's only finding his way in the game as well. He's not very experienced. It's a place where it can be difficult playing young players. It's kind of back to my point about maybe giving a guy a bit of experience as a fullback before you put him in there. I think I mentioned last week that he mightn't have been a bad shout at right back, and maybe Mark Walsh in the middle. Even the substitution there against Cobh, where Mark Walsh came off and Andy Spain was left on, I thought was probably not the right thing to do at that stage when they need, as much experience as they could on the pitch. So I think there is an option maybe to have a look at Andy Spain right back, from the point of view that there's no one tearing up trees as the right back, and maybe he just might click there. And you do have the option to play Ben Reardon there or Mark Walsh there, I think. And I think both of those would probably be more kind of a more meaner, tougher pair, which is really where a lot of the rocks of Treaty's victories came in the last few years, with the likes of Shane Gearns back there and Anto O'Donnell and Mark Walsh there, where they didn't stand in ceremony and they didn't try to play whatever. They just were really good old-fashioned defenders, if you like, that won every header, won every tackle, and just cleared their lines.
Absolutely, and it will be a very intriguing tie on Friday night between Treaty United and Waterford. And of course, there'll be other games like Bray hosting Wexford, Galway hosting Longford, Finn Harps hosting Cobh, and Kerry home at Mount Park against Athlone, so there'll be plenty to discuss. Noel, we won't have too much time for that, Noel, because we have plenty to discuss before we'll meet again next week. Republic of Ireland are facing Latvia, obviously, in a friendly tomorrow night before the big one next Monday, Noel. I know I'd be a regular enough listener to Off the Ball and Loose Talk, Noel, and they talk a lot about the hype train, and a player you'd know well in the past, Ferguson, and his son Evan Ferguson has got a lot of plaudits, obviously, for his start with Brighton. I suppose the cynic, or the pessimist in me is screaming, don't put too much pressure like the English people would normally do and the English media would on players. But it seems like some people have lost their run themselves, but he seems to be the great white hope going in, Nolan, and we're going to beat France 3-0.
Well, listen, we might take 2-0, but look, isn't it great that we have someone to talk to? And he certainly is. Look, looks a fantastic player. He's played so well. He's very intelligent. He's physically so big, really, for a guy so young. And it's understandable that people are getting excited about it. I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's the number one sport in the country, and everyone, will be tuned in this week. The fact that he's scoring goals in the Premier League, with kind of a regularity now, which we haven't seen in a good few years. And in fairness to that team, there's a lot of players that have come in. It looks a lot stronger than it was 2 or 3 years ago. France are coming over. There's obviously always a bit of hassle in the camp there. I see there was talk about Griezmann leaving the camp because he wasn't made captain. And there's always some of the French, a couple of retirements as well, and it'll be their first competitive game since the World Cup. And I remember Ireland having some good wins against teams like that. I remember when Croatia finished third in the World Cup, I think we played them in Lansdowne Road and beat them 2-0 in the next qualifying group. So look, we obviously hoping against hope. I'm sure if they don't lose the game, it'll be seen as a good result. And look, we'll probably take that today.
Absolutely. I mean, Noel, I think we discussed it at the time when the group was announced, but an incredibly tough group. I know France are playing Holland actually on Thursday night in their first game in it, but it's not just that, Noel, isn't it? You look at it like France and Holland, who are notably better than Ireland. The problem we have is that Greece are not far inferior to us either, and they were the seed below us, so that's where the real trouble comes in as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and they're the games that really trouble us, aren't they? Like they won't have any trouble getting up for the particularly at home, the French and the Dutch games, but it's the likes of the matches against Greece where they have to go out maybe and dominate the game and kind of make it happen. Are always the ones that cause us trouble. But look, there'll be so many twists and turns in this group. I think the most important thing is that Ireland are in touch, points wise, that they're in touch, as far into the group as is possible. I think that's very, very important.
We can be a fickle, I suppose, and cutthroat soccer nation at time, Noel, when we put our minds to it. But in terms of Stephen Kenny's tenure, do you foresee a situation where Stephen Kenny obviously doesn't beat France? Look, it's unlikely that Ireland will beat them or even draw with them, considering the quality that they have. When you look at the fact that they have so many retirees and other things, and still have a lot of quality, but do you foresee a situation where if he doesn't maybe get a win, maybe in the first 3 games, that the hammering for Kenny out again?
I think there's no doubt about that if they don't get a win in the first 3 games, but it's something probably that you don't want to speculate on just yet. I think that that they could surprise us. I mean, Ireland are always at their best when they're written off. There's been a lot of big results in the Aviva and Lansdowne Road in the last 20 or 25 years. It's a new group. I'm sure the players are, they're kind of getting to that stage now where they've maybe 12 or 15 or 20 games played, and they'll be a lot better than they were, a couple of years ago. And I wouldn't be without hope about Monday night.
That has all been building up to this qualification campaign. That's always been the talk under Stephen Kenny. So we do hope it goes well for him and the Irish players. So we'll be supporting Treaty and Ireland this week on what will be a busy week. And we hope you can join us next week on the Soccer Scene 7th episode, where we'll be discussing plenty of results around the League of Ireland and, of course, the Republic of Ireland again.